Thanks for coming for this presentation, Playing with Code. Who has not done web development before? Sweet. How many first years do we have? Cool. Second year? Third year?
What do you say? Can you speak up?
Oh yeah. If you've done web development before?
Yeah.
Yeah? 2 years, above 2 years?
Yeah, more than that.
Oh, sweet. 5? Oh, all right, we got one. Sweet. All right, so let's get into it. I'm a UI engineer, and I work at a company called Quid. It's in San Francisco. I love JavaScript. I've been with coding in JavaScript about 5 years. Before I graduated college, I swore I wouldn't work at a company that does JavaScript, but I really like it now. So before we get into some web stuff, let's revisit the word play. So if you just Google play, you're going to get this definition: engage in activity for enjoyment and recreation rather than a serious or practical purpose. So in this workshop, we're going to have a little bit of a playful approach and some more definitions to get in that. These are some quotes by Linda Flory. She has some articles on play and I believe how that affects children. So a few things here. I like the last one a lot, which is play involves repetition of experience, exploration, experimentation, and imitation of one's surroundings. So one of the ways that I like to learn code is to watch other people code. And I think that's, at least for me, that's the fastest way that I learn. So there's few things before we get into it we're going to touch upon. So we're going to do 3 things during this presentation. We're going to learn the basics of web. We're going to show you how to find resources on the web. And we're going to create a safe environment to play. This is to create a fast feedback loop as you code. You want to fail fast, and you want to be able to recover your work. So we'll all get into that. So the first one, we got some toys in our hands. We got the DOM API. We got HTML, CSS. For JavaScript, we have a whole slew of technology available to us: React, Vue, Angular. For browser web applications, and then we have React Native and Flutter, which allows you to do development on your phones. We also have Node to do backend development. And also we have editor and browser of your choice. Specifically for this workshop, we're going to use React. If you have never used React, it's OK. We're going to go through step by step. And for editor and browser, it also doesn't matter. We're going to cover that soon. So has anybody heard some of these things? JFiddle or CodePen? Has anybody heard of CodeSandbox? Cool. CodeSandbox is a cool one. So these are online editors that allow you to have an editor, and also it compiles your code, and you can view the code. It's really nice. You don't have to set up your laptop and install Yarn and Webpack or whatever. It can get pretty messy in the beginning. So we're going to go through 2 challenges if we have time. So the first one is going to be a UI challenge. I give this question out to all the people that I interview. This question was also the first question that I got in San Francisco when I was interviewing. And it was by Alt School, and I got destroyed on the first one. I coded up the challenge, and then went into
What is
Alt School. They make school programs from, I think, they do K through 6th grade. They might do middle school now, but they're pretty cool. They use technology to educate children. So I did the challenge. I showed up to the interview. And the developer there just ripped apart my code, had me explain different things, and I have no idea what I did. I used jQuery. So let's do that exercise together. So here's a challenge. So we're going to create a board that has a dimension, and each tile is going to start as white. And as you click through the white, it's going to toggle through random colors, and then returning to white at the end. So each time a tile is toggled, we want to effectively assign a new color. We're going to need a few buttons. We're going to have a clear button that clears the state of the board. We also have a save button that's going to persist the state of the stuff that we rendered. And for a bonus question, we're going to build a gallery of all the saved states. So before we dive into this UI challenge, let's break it down a little bit. All right. So first thing is that we have to build a board. Build a board. N by M tiles. We need some toggling interaction here. So on click, assign random color. And let's see. We need a few buttons here. So we need to have a clear button. It clears the board. And let's have a save button. Save button that saves the state. And as a bonus, we're going to build a gallery. Build a gallery. Cool. So there are the 5 things that we need to build. So as I mentioned before, we're going to use one of the playground environments, and the one that we're going to use is CodeSandbox. If you have not used CodeSandbox before, it's amazing. This is the intro screen. There are these different cubes to select for different environments that you want to have. We're going to use React. This was also built by a Facebook intern. Amazing. That's not normal for an intern, but they did it anyways. So here, it's kind of like an editor setup. You can also turn on the setting to make it the same as VS Code. You can run VS Code inside the browser, but we will use a default setting for here. So on the left side, we see the files that we have available to us. You can install more dependencies. So we have the editor here in the middle. And on the right, we see that is shown on the screen. So this is using Create React App. It's a Webpack configuration that allows you to run React App without really configuring. It's really nice. It's also one of the recommended ways for you to run React. So let's dive into this a little bit. Before this, so we have some new people here. How familiar are you guys with HTML? So, okay. Sweet. How about CSS? No. All right, that's a good plus here. How about some ES6? Nope. Okay. How about array.map? Are you guys familiar with array.map? Nope. Cool. All right. Sweet. So let's dig into it. So one of the things that I like to mention is there's a lot of you're in a time where you can learn any kind of web development for free online, and it's amazing. So let's go through that. So first one is HTML. How does HTML work? Usually I like to search with MDN in the beginning. This is going to give us to the Mozilla Developer Network. And let's just type in HTML, see what we get. So we have some hypertext markup language. We see some of these tag elements if you have seen before. We're going to be mostly using div. This is like a basic element on the web. There are some other ones here, but we're not going to use them today. So basically, when you look at a website, they are built using HTML. And here I'm looking at the developer console. You can right-click on any page and then go to Inspect Element on your browser. So here we see this ugly mess here. And these are in kind of like a tree hierarchy. So from the very top, we have a tag called body. And inside of this body, we have several other tags. And we can dive through into this main tag. And then we see a bunch of divs inside of here too. So a few more things here. You can have these properties on your HTML tags. Some of them we see ID. These will be easy for you to target your element in different cases, and we'll go through that too. You can apply classes. This is how usually a CSS is applied. So how does this work? So in the browser, you get a thing called a document. It's a global object that you can access. And this is part of what people call the DOM API. So in this document, we can do a few things here. So I'll be initializing a variable. I'll be using ES6 syntax. So one of the ways we can do is const. And let's say a new element. And from this new element, we're going to be assigning it to document.createElement. In createElement, the first argument that you get is the tag type. And any part of this time you have any kind of question, please let me know, and we can go through that. It's a safe place to ask questions. And we're going to be building on top of what we go through right now. So if it doesn't make sense now, it's OK to ask now. So let's create an element called div. Right now, the div doesn't have anything. It's just an empty tag. So let's put something in there. So new element .inner HTML. And we're going to say, hello, Dayton web developers. So now we have our div, and we set the content of the div, and we want to plug it into the site that we have on the left. So one of the other operations that we can do is we can say document.body .prepend, and let's insert this document. So here, as you see, we've just inserted a div element to the site. And this is how people build applications. You're creating these elements, and you're inserting in the document. And it's quite powerful, and you can do a lot of things just from this console. You can edit any kind of website that you want. You won't be able to share it with other people, but you can still dissect or add certain elements, see how it works. Any questions so far? Cool.
So just to kind of clarify, this is using JavaScript. Like if you were writing code with a server-side language like a Python or something, just send HTML to the browser. This is how you're talking about React and Vue and some of these other things work.
So let's skip a few steps. Let's try this with React. And we're going to use something called functional components. It's OK. We're going to go take this slowly. So we're going to take everything out here. We're going to do the same thing that we just did before. And I'll code this up and then explain what's happening here. So I'm going to be creating a div here. One of the common syntax is that you create like a beginning marker for your element, and you also have to close your element. You see this slash here. This is how it denotes it's a closing tag. So inside of here, let's put down, hello, Dayton web developers. You can ignore the top part for now. We're not going to be using this style. You can also ignore the bottom part here. What's happening here, we have a function called app, and that's what we're going to call a React component. And what a React component does, it returns a bit of HTML. The syntax here is not a regular JavaScript syntax. We're parsing this information. It gets a little bit hairy, but I think it's simple to understand that this HTML bit, we were able to inject it in here. We can do some other things here. Say we want to have let's create another function here called name. And inside of here, we're going to be copy pasting the bits here. And instead of returning this bit, we can return a React component instead. So the way React works is one of the conventions is that you would name your components with an upper class. And we can say name, and we can self-close it in one line. So we can create effectively these HTML tags using React. Any questions so far? Anything that doesn't make sense? Yep.
So we just use the function name as the element?
Yep. Yep. Cool. So let's start digging into this problem a little bit. And whenever I save, it it prettifies all your code, which is also nice. So we need to build a board with some tiles. So let's go ahead and build one tile. So here, let's make a function called tile. And for now, let's return a div here and a tile. So instead of name, we're returning a tile instead. Let's go ahead and delete the name. Okay, so now let's introduce CSS a little bit. I'm going to say import.
So CSS stands for cascading style sheet?
Oh, yeah.
Which is the styling, the bolding, the coloring, the prettiness of the website.
Does this work? No. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to turn on VS Code here. All right, now we can have some side-by-side code. Let's delete this guy. So using CSS, there's a lot of weird things about CSS. You might see a lot of memes about like Peter from Family Guy trying to unfold all the blindfolds, and every time he pulls, it becomes like messier and messier. Some simple rules here. Previously, we saw some HTML tags here that has a class name. And we're going to be using this method to be able to target a tag element. So we can denote a class name by a period. So let's make a tile class. Cannot find relative. All right. We have a tile here. Let's apply a background here. Background color. Let's make this blue or red. And the way you apply the styles here is by stating class name and then the name of the class that we just made. So in this case, tile. And it's not working. Oh, let's do it here. Okay, so we were able to target the div that has a class name tile. It doesn't quite look like a tile, so let's make it look a bit of a tile. We can set width and height of this div. So let's make it perhaps 20 pixel. height 20 pixel. It looks a little bit like a tile. I think it's safe to get rid of this text. Cool, so we have one tile. There's some other properties that we'll get into. The first one is we can target a different type of state of the div. So here, let's target the hover. Let's set the opacity to be a little bit lower so we can see when we're hovering over. So it's getting a little bit lighter. One of the things that you can do to your DOM elements is to set event handlers. Let's see that on the DOM API first. I believe it's new element, add event listener. The first one will be the type of the event listener that we want. There are several, but we're going to use a thing called click event. Let's use function here. And inside of this function, we can output to the console. We can do that by saying console log hello. So now we have added a function that's going to be triggered every time this div will detect a click event. So every time we click on this hello, we can see that it's printing out. So we're going to be doing the same thing on the React side. For React, it comes with a few helpers. In this case, we're going to be using onClick. So in the onClick, one of the arguments is it takes in a function here. And inside the function, let's do the same thing. Console.log hello. On the bottom left side, we see a console, so we can open that up. Let's click on this but tile. Now we see the hello being printed out a bunch of times. Any questions so far? Cool. So let's try some things out. We need to make a board. So perhaps let's make a new component called board. And in here, let's try having a tile. We're going to be having a board here. OK. So we have a single tile. Let's try to add a second one. Oh, there's a syntax error. So one of the things about React is that the very topmost tag has to enclose everything that is inside. So to get around this, we'll just have a outer div here, acting as a parent. So now we see two tiles. Let's add a little bit more. There's a third tile. All right. Ideally, we'd like the row to be going from left to right. Right now, it's going from top to bottom. So there's a property in CSS called div, a div called display. So by default, div has, I believe, inline block. And that's going to, instead of inserting to the left, it's going to insert to the next line below. And once you, so the two things that you should know, the first one is display inline. That's going to be displaying stuff to the left without going to the next row. We're going to skip a little bit. Has anybody heard of Flexbox?
Can I pause it just for a second? Would you mind, the yellow pane that you have there is the currently rendered project. Would you mind showing us the rendered HTML that
Yes.
it's producing? So this is the end result. So everything in that generated work environment has generated this, which would ultimately be going to the web.
So this is the bit that we're seeing here from here. So we have the outer div that we see. Let's close this one for now. So the outer div here, that's what we see. And then we have 3 tiles that we added. And then we see with a class name tile. There's a difference that you see here. On the right side, it says class. On the left side, it says class name. The reason this is that in JavaScript, class is a reserved word, so you can't really use it for anything else. So that's why they decided to use class name instead. And a lot of the properties here will be hyphened, but in JavaScript, it's going to be camel cased. We don't exactly see, no, we do see it. We see an event handler here, and here's the onClick that we set. And here's a no operation. Cool, I didn't know you could do that. That's cool. So let's use Flexbox. And a lot of these are like new content coming your way. If I'm going too fast, let me know. So one of the pages that I like to use is display flex CSS tricks. I forget about how Flexbox works, and I always come to this page. It's really good. So let's go through this a little bit.
So is everybody else in the plan?
Yep.
And Flexbox Zombies is a great way to practice.
Flexbox zombies.
I also heard of Flexbox Froggy.
Froggy. Nice. That looks fun. So the Flexbox works is that it has a parent container. So here we see a purple container here with 3 items. And the first thing that you need to do is set the display to be flex. So let's do that. We're going to go back to the code here. On this board, we're going to set the parent to be class name. Let's do container. Let's bring back our CSS file here. Pop it to the right. We're going to say container display flex. Hey, it's already shifting the direction here. But let's go a little bit deeper. So there are additional properties that we can set. We can set flex direction. Flex direction. We can set it to be column, which is going to be the way that we saw earlier. Or we can set this to be row. And we'll introduce the other properties as we go, but this is the first one that we're going to be applying. And by default, it's going to be applied to be as flex direction row, and that's why we didn't have to set it to make it the way it is. So here, I'm going to introduce one more concept. Here we have displayed 3 tiles, but we want to be a bit more generative. So let's generate these instead. Let's initialize an array, and I'm going to call this row, maybe rows. Upper class array. This is one of the JavaScript methods that you can access. And then let's type in a number. Rows is 3. So we're about to use maps. So let's review maps a little bit first. So we're going to have an example array here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's make this perhaps a little bit bigger here. You can access each values by using a square bracket and a number. It's a zero-based index, so it starts with 0. We get, whoa, reference error. Huh. That is, let's try this instead. Okay. Well, let's use this one instead. Clear. So let's set an array here. Let's access the first one by saying 0. We can access the second one, third one. There's some other methods that come with an array, and the first one is map. And the way it works is that it's going to iterate through each element in the array, and you can perform some operations. So we can say map. There's a variable that comes out. Has anybody used arrow functions before? Cool. So let's review that first. So we have a regular function here. Another way to write this is to say you assign it to a variable, and we can say func. So the syntax here is that we see parentheses. This is where you take in arguments, and then an arrow function. You can also use brackets here. And then, so let's use, okay, function, hello. So now we have created a function, hello, and every time we call it, it's going to be printing out in the console. Let's try to make that in a arrow function form. Hello 2. So it's just a different syntax. It basically does the same thing. So, yep.
So, are those parentheses where I mentioned you?
Yep. You're going to see some funny things here. We can say function hello, and let's say a name. Let's do console log, hello. And for console log, you can use pass in multiple arguments. So when we say hello, it has inserted the argument into the console log. And we can do the same thing with a arrow function. So let's do const hello 3. Here we're going to get name. Oop. Ah, thank you. Some syntactical things that you might see. If you have only one variable, you don't need a parentheses, so I might do that. Also, if you don't provide a bracket, it's the same thing as saying return console log. So it's another shorthand that we'll be using here. So we can just say, oh, get rid of the parentheses here. Let's get rid of that and say console log. Hello, name. There's a hello already. Let's do hello 4. so let's go back to map. So we have our array here. From this array, we're going to use map, and this is going to take in the function. The first argument is going to be the content of the array. So in this case, it's the numbers. And then we can return a new value. Say, let's multiply these by 2. Array.map is going to be returning a new array with the new contents. So perhaps we can assign it to another variable here, double. When we look inside the double, all the values have been doubled now. When we look at the array is still intact. We can do some weird things here. Let's do const equals string array.map. This time we're going to ignore everything that's inside of here. And let's just return the string. This is going to override all the values instead of the numbers. It's going to be inserting into strings. Does that make sense for everyone? Cool. So we're going to use the same thing, but instead with React components. So here we have a rows. If we check the content of the rows, error in sandbox. Not sure what's happening with CodeSandbox. But here we're going to be seeing a array size 3. And the contents will be undefined for all the values. Let's get rid of that. And that's OK. So this is one shorthanded way of just creating an array of certain size. So now here, let's use the maps technique that we just learned. So we're going to say rows.map. We're going to be ignoring all the arguments because we're not going to be using it. And here, let's return a tile component instead. Let's get rid of these. Go away, Siri. All right. Nothing is showing. Let's just check what's in here quickly. Rows, those are all the arrays. Array.map. Let's perhaps check the content here. Root. Okay. Huh. It's not showing up.
It should render another, right?
Yeah, I should render all the tiles here. This is a little funny. Let's do a test here. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Let's cheat a little bit here. Let's create array. Perhaps create row. Let's pass in a number here. Let's create a for loop. We're going to start by 0. And let's go until it's less than number. And then we're going to be incrementing the index by 1. Return array. There might be something funny happening with the undefined here. Create array. I think create row.
Is that not commented out?
That's OK. Yeah, this part is, this won't affect anything.
You're just showing what's content's going to be.
Oh,
So that's working now.
create row.
Yeah. So I guess you can't have an array of undefineds. Good to know. That's a little bit difficult to see how many we have there. So let's go ahead and add some border. We're going to add a border of 1 pixel, a solid type with black. Okay, now we can see 3 tiles here. So now we were able to create the rows. Let's try to create the columns now. Let's use the same technique. This time, create row. That was a bad function name. Let's do 2. So when you have HTML in JavaScript, the way you run JavaScript instead of printing them out is by having curly braces. And that's what we see here. So if we were to not have this, it's going to be rendered as a text instead. Let's bring back these. So this time, let's map over the columns. Let's map over the columns inside the rows. So here, we're going to be returning columns map, and inside of these maps, tile. And one of the other thing that we need here.
Those curly braces are a template convention, which is commonly used in a variety of languages. So you have a static structure of HTML, and you're injecting data using a templating system.
Yep. It needs a outer div here that we've missed. Is this part kosher? So we have 2 arrays. We're iterating through the first array, called rows. And from the rows, we're iterating through the maps. And that's how we get our first row and the columns. I think these are actually reversed. Whoops. Columns first, and then rows. Cool. So we have 3 rows with 2 columns each. So I'm going to introduce one more concept here. And this is how you pass data between different components. In React, we have something called props. So whenever you set here, so we can have some values like rows, columns, and we can set some value from the top. So here I've set the board props to be rows to be 3 and columns to be 4. The way you pass it in is that it's the first argument of your function called props. And we can have props.rows and props.columns. Do I still have people here? Cool.
So props is a collection of things, and those things are rows and columns.
Yep.
So you pass the props into your function, and now that it's in there, you can now use those rows and columns because props has been thrown in there.
Let's make this a little bit bigger. Is that too small?
Yeah, you were better off when it was larger.
Okay, let's dial back up.
So what's stopping you from, instead of using props, just using 2 arguments as that function?
Ah.
That function, right?
It is a function. So when this code recompiles into actual JavaScript, you can't quite do something like rows and columns here. I suppose this is like just one of the conventions that it has. It's like just the first argument is all the arguments that you pass in.
Gotcha, and then, okay.
So let's go back to the problem. And all the tiles need to start as white. So let's do that instead of being.
We haven't checked off anything, successes yet. What have we done so far?
We made a board.
We created X and Y.
Uh,
Create a board.
Okay. Yep. So we're able to build a board. Let's cross this out. I don't know what the syntax is here. Oops. So now let's assign a random color. Wrong browser. So right now we have to go back and forth between two files right now. I'm going to crank up the difficulty just a little bit, just to make it easier to read and faster for us to code.
You can put the peanut butter in the chocolate.
Yep. We're going to be moving, if you're disgusted by having HTML in JavaScript, now let's put CSS in JavaScript too. There are multiple ways to do it. The one that I like is called emotion. We're going to be needing two libraries, so emotion core, and then we also need emotion styled. And the way that you use these is you first import styled from emotion styled. And this one has a really funny syntax. So let's recreate the tile here.
So why do you like emotion? Why do you reach to that as a tool?
So there are two main CSS solutions for JavaScript. First one, I believe the first one came out was Glamour, and that uses ObjectBased to do your styles. For emotion, it allows you to write CSS, so it's easier to read if you're already used to CSS. And the writing your styles in object form gets a little bit funny. So actually, let's try that out. So we have a div here. So instead of having a class name, we can pass in a style instead. This takes on an object. So it's going to be weird syntax, but it's going to be double brackets here. And we can say background, red. That is thrown up. Styles. I might need additional setup to do that, to parse that through. So let's try emotion. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. So the syntax here is, let's make a new tile. Tile. We can say styled dot, and you can target any tags that you want. In this case, we want a div. Then we're going to use backticks. In JavaScript, you can use these. It's template literals, and you can do multi-line strings. The way this works is a little bit funny. It's effectively like a function call, and it injects. You can inject more JavaScript into it, but let's see how it's done. So we can say background, red. We don't need this tile anymore. Let me leave it up there. Styles are not being applied. Let me try. Let me try saving this. And reload. Background color.
So where are you referencing it? This page. Oh, I see it's being applied to tile.
Yep. Let's try a few things here.
It doesn't have any size, so I don't know if it'll show up there. It doesn't have any size.
Oh, good call. All right. Thank you, Nathan. Let's set a width and a height. Shablam, it's back. All right, border, 1 pixel, solid, black. So this is just allowing us to use CSS in JavaScript. Don't worry too much about how it's working right now with template literals. This way I don't have to go back and forth between 2 files. It's going to be like easier to trace. Okay, I'm going to collapse create row. We have the new tiles now. I need to start out as white. Let's make this light gray. This way when we hover over, we should be able to see that. Okay, hover, opacity. The here, n% here, this is the same thing as tile. It's using, if it's inside of a style, it targets that style that you're on, and you can add additional properties to it. In this case, we're checking out the hover. So on this tile, we now want to create a new color every time you click on it. So first, let's put a callback here on click. Let's see if this is working. So in this function, we're going to get some coordinates here. We're going to ignore the first parameter. The second parameter is the index of the array. So let's have column index. Let's use underscore. And another underscore, row index. So every time we click on these, we should be able to see the coordinates here. All right. The other part that we need now is to be able to, we need a data object to be able to access the state of the colors that we have. Since we're using 2 arrays, I'll be using an array. So at first, let's just try an array. And I'm just going to hard code the colors here. Let's do blue, red, green. makes it a little bit more yellow. So I want to be able to pass in a color to the tile. And I wanted to grab it from the colors array. For now, let's just use the row index. This is just a single one-dimensional array, or a two-dimensional array. So from here, we need to do a little bit more. So from tiles, instead of hard coding the colors here, we can inject some JavaScript. So this is just a syntax it uses. So you need to use $, bracket. This is how you denote it's JavaScript. This takes in a callback. The first argument is the props that is passed into this component. And we're setting it to the colors prop. So in here, we have set the colors. We have a colors array of 4 colors, and we're looking at the row index. And depending on the row index, so the first row is blue, second row is red, and the third row is green. So let's create an array. I'm just going to call it create data here. I'm going to get column and row. Perhaps let's say row number, column number. And we have the data object here. Let's just use a regular for loop. Column number. And we're going to use another. So each time we iterate through, we want to be creating a new array. And for each of those array, we want to push, say, light gray instead of white. And each time we create a subarray, we want to push it into the data array. Subarray. Then we want to return our data. Is that part okay?
What's the push doing?
It adds it to the array. It adds it to the back of the array. So instead of colors here, we're going to say create data. And then we have our rows and columns. The left side is okay right now. So let's check the values that we get. Thank you. Log. Let's check out the colors here. We got an array of these things. Push, push. All right, colors of array, and these array are just empty at the moment. Let's check out some things here. Pardon me?
I guess it's something wrong with row down.
Oh, yep. Type up. Coolio. All right. So we have an array, and each of those has the values. I think I flipped these again. So let's do column. Okay. So I'm going to jam a little bit more. We need a way to be able to update our data structure here. And we're going to be creating something called React hooks. This is a new thing that came out recently. Here we're going to use state. The way that use state works is that it returns an array. So use state here. The initial state is going to be passed into this function here. So we can pass in our create data. Oh, stay on this page. So in this array, the first element of this array is the data that we want. So we can just say colors. And the second one is the updater for the colors. So in this case, let's say set colors. We're going to get rid of that. So what we want to do is every time we click on the tile, we want to update the color. So for the sake of this, let's do every time a onClick happens, let's do set colors, and we're going to create a new colors. We'll address this in a little bit, but let's do column index, row index, and let's update that to red. Pass in this colors. Let's check how that does. OnClick, not working. Oh. Cross origin thrown error. All right, I'm going to quickly make another one. Let me just blast through this. Update data. Data. Let's get row num, column num. Let's say new data. And we're going to do data map. We'd be getting a subarray here. And we'll say new data here. I'm spreading across all the elements in the subarray. And I'm creating a new array here. One of the things that watch out for in React is that you don't want to, you want to have pure functions that update your data, which means that whatever you're passing from the top, you don't mutate that variable. You return a new object that doesn't have a reference to the previous one.
So that's kind of a shortcut way to do that.
So one of the things that you're going to run into in React, if you don't have pure functions, you might get this like really funky state where you're updating a state from a child, and its sibling also has the same data, and it might get into this state where it's rendering unintentionally. Yeah, so in a lot of React code, you're going to see a lot of these pure functions to manipulate your data. So let's do column num here. Let's do row num. Set this color. Data. Let's pass in the colors here. Row num. And then let's say red.
You need a semicolon after that set colors?
It's usually okay. Update data. Let's see what this new data looks like. New color.
So if something goes wrong, can you debug it, like step through it?
Yeah.
Just using the browser?
So here we're getting the correct values. Oh, all right. This color thing is wrong. Column index here. All right. Column index is undefined. Huh. That's strange. Okay, so we are getting some errors. So let's create this into a return function. Let's check out some values here. Console.log. Next row index. Not quite sure what's happening here. Error sandbox must only be passed. Non-empty expression, this is fine. So these are coming out correctly. Let's check out the colors real fast. Colors. Okay, that's chill too. Maybe I did some syntax errors here. Column index, row index. Okay. That's funny. Let's do column index. That's fine. Check out row index. That's coming out good. Nathan, can you spot what I'm doing wrong? Maybe I'm not seeing something. Let's see.
Do we have enough colors for all columns?
Oh, that's a good call. Did I flip these again? I tend to do that. Oh, row index. All right, chill.
Collaborative troubleshooting.
All right, this is gonna work. So we have color here.
I feel good about it.
Repair program.
Row index. Let's click on these. All right, okay, some things are messed up. Let's see. So in the new data, did I flip these again? Yeah. Row num, column num. All right. So now we have colors working. Now they need to be randomized. So let's do that. In these update color, instead of passing in a color, let's assign a random color. So we can do, let's have a theme. And inside this theme, let's have blue, green, red, orange. Let's assign an index here. Math.floor. So random returns a value from 0 to 1, and you can apply to a number, multiply by a number, and then floor that number, and that's effectively how you get a random number. So let's assign randomly from a theme to an index. We don't need this guy anymore. So hopefully now every time we click on one, it's just white now. Okay. Let me check out this for a second. Undefined. Math.random. Perhaps the index is not right. Not a number. Oh. I think this might be random. Oh, lowercase random. All right. Cool. So now we have, every time we click on a tile, now we change these into a random values. So let's check our note. So now we can assign our random color. Before we go for it, any questions? I stumbled through that one a bit.
That was a very real world application. That was, I felt myself doing it today.
Okay. So let's do the other ones. These are pretty straightforward. So let's start off with a clear button. So in the board here, on top of the board, let's create some buttons. Let's have a clear button. And we want to have a onClear handler. So now we have a lot of logic living in board. But the nice thing about React is that you can move around your code by copy pasting and simply by passing it through props. So let's go through that. So we need access to these colors and set colors on the button, which are siblings. So now what we're going to do is actually drag all these parts. Let's pass on the rows here. Columns, we're going to be needing colors, also set colors. And let's go back to our board. Let's get these from our props. This is called object destructuring. You can gain access to your object, and you can initialize the variables this way. It's a little bit faster. Color, set color. We have 3 here, we have 4 here. Props not defined. 3, 4. All right. So we're going to have another onClick handler here, which takes in a function. And we want to reset the colors all to be white. So we're going to set colors, and we already have a function that's going to give us a default values, which is here. So let's try that out. Let's have button here. All right. Click, and then that saves, clears. Good on this part? Chill. So let's do the saving part. So we need another button here. Button save. Instead of doing a, instead of saving to the local host, let's use another use state. So we can have save data, set save data, use state. Let's initialize this to be empty variable right now. One thing that I'd like to do is on click, let's do new save data. We're going to use our object spreader one more time with the existing save data. And we want to push our new state, which is colors. And then we want to be able to save that data. New save data. Save. So we can't see that right now. So let's create a list to view what is displaying. So we can do save data, which is an array. So let's do another map. Let's ignore the first variable for now. Let's look at the index. And from this index, let's just display them. All right, so save. We're not seeing that at the moment. Let's see what's inside save data. Right now it's empty. So there is our array. And, oh. All right, first one, second one. So it is saving. So let's check our two things here. So we made a clear, we made a save button here. Let's build a gallery. I think this part is like the coolest part about React. So we can use our previously built components. And let's quickly build a mini gallery. So in save data, we have just saved the entire color chunk. So we should be able to reuse this board component up top and render those states. So I'm going to just grab that entire component here that we set above. And here we're passing in the colors from here. I'm going to rename this so it doesn't have a variable clash. Saved colors. So every time we save now, we get to render a new board. We have a new state, another state. But for the gallery, it's a little bit big. And if we have a lot of save states, it's going to be difficult to see. So let's make a mini board. So we have our class here. I'm going to be creating a new function called miniboard. It's going to take in some props. We give people 3 hours. This is a take-home. They complete this task and then come back, and then we'll review their code. We will be asking them questions about like, what were their thinking patterns, what problems did they have, and you get to see, and we let you use any framework that you want. So we get to see how familiar people are with different technologies. We can also see how they interpret the question. We get a lot of different answers, which I really like. Yeah, some people would make like options to create different like prefix size templates and sizing. There's different ways that people do galleries. Yeah.
I find pre-testing candidates is becoming the norm for those job seekers.
Mm-hmm.
Just an FYI. It used to be personality testing was not unusual, but project managers are being given a week and a mini project and asked to simulate a project. Coders are asking to submit code, you name it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some other good ones is building like a calendar widget, building a type ahead. There are other exercises that you can do similar to this. So let's copy this whole junk.
So you're expecting the candidate to know everything they need to know to do that job before you hire them?
Yep.
As opposed to them learning on the job?
We also have different levels of questions depending on your like college grad, or you have like done certain jobs before. All of our questions tend to be real life questions. So the other challenges that we had here, the second one is no challenge, is to pull a list of repositories from an organization from GitHub, and then you have to order that by number of stars. So we see if you can use, if you can interact with an API and how you handle that, and then we're going to go into like, okay, how are we going to do pagination? So then that's like a whole another question. And we get to ask more questions if they know how to complete it. So if they can complete the first section, and that's good to go.
Roland, I agree with you, that seems to be asking a lot, but.
Well, because a lot of companies are looking for somebody that can do the latest technology. I want you to know, I want you to have 10 years of experience on 2019 technologies.
Depends on what level you're hiring for. There is also a big difference of the expectation of you doing a whiteboard demonstration. And I don't think you could do this on a whiteboard.
No.
So, I mean, there's a big difference between take this home, figure it out, versus, it sounds like you're assuming that this is in the interview, the assumption is that they would know this like the back of their hand. No, it is, I don't think anybody can get all the information in their brain, it just doesn't fit. So,
And
I'm,
a lot of these frameworks, if you have the basics, you're able to transition to other like Angular and Vue with just some study and research that just through practice, and so that's why they're giving you the chance to show your skills and if you can learn.
and Key's demonstration here, you can fork this and tinker around with this on your own. And it would be a great example to have as part of your portfolio. Not necessarily just copying this and say, this is my portfolio, but copying this and getting familiar with it and how it works and create maybe a chessboard game.
Mm-hmm.
And that you're intimate with it. And then that would be another peg on your portfolio. And it would be, hey, I've gone through this workshop with Key, and this is what I learned, and this is what I enhanced, I've iterated on. So that's the type of language that a prospective employer is looking for.
We used to do something similar. We give them a hard deadline, like do as much as you can in 3 hours. You can't go over 3 hours. Like, because we also want to see how much they could get done, how honest they were. You know, how did they deal with, giving a task that they might not know how to do. Did they do just that? Did they go above and beyond? Like all kinds of, you can do. There's a lot of things other than just like getting it done that you could get out of having someone do something like this.
Have you smelled copy and paste?
Oh yeah.
It has a smell.
Well, you can, just by asking a few questions, like, yeah.
Yep.
Pretty easy. We would always do something called Conway's Game of Life, which is similar to this, only it's a simulation that runs and it turns cubes black and white based off of how many other cubes are turned on and off around them. So it's actually really similar. But,
So let's make this gallery real quick. So I've shifted some stuff around. I made the on-click handler to be at the very top of the container. So I want something smaller, and I want to be able to click this entire board and be able to load my new state. But the tiles are still a little bit bigger. So I want to create a new tile. Where did my tile go? All right. So here's this cool thing about CSS and JavaScript. So I'll be creating a mini tile now. A secondary thing that you can do with style components is that you can pass in a component instead. And what this will do is it's going to copy paste the entire upper sections of this. So some things that we want. We don't want the opacity to change. So let's do opacity 1 on hover. And for width and height, let's make that to be a little bit smaller. But all the other ones will automatically apply. So let's go back to our mini board. So instead of tile, let's have this to be a mini tile. For this container, let's make it a little bit more viewable. So I'm going to be doing, let's do a container here, style div. Let's do margin right, say another 5 pixels. I think we also want a Flexbox. So instead of div, we're going to have a container. Change this to container. All right. So hopefully now, this time we save, we're going to see a smaller board. That is not a smaller board. Well, let's try this out. Let's make this into 5. Huh. Gonna save.
Let's use the middle. Choose a new tile.
Do you have
Yep.
any board and,
Oh, right. Mini board. Ah. All right. Now we have a mini board. So each time we save now.
And that's interactive also?
Hmm?
And that's interactive?
Yep. So if we click on the first one, it's going to load in. We can do like some more simple stuff here. Let's use the container one more time. That's the one that has a flex, display flex. So this time it should go to the right. Yep. So now we get to have a gallery and also be able to save, view the save state. So that was quite the journey. So there's some end slides here. So hopefully one of the things that you get to see is kind of like the evolution of a problem and be able to solve that question. Oftentimes, I find that code tends to be very organic. And it's difficult to sometimes just to have your final goal and just to get there. I like to have a code where it's easy to copy and paste and be able to move around code. We haven't gotten to that point too much. But using JavaScript and also CSS and JavaScript, you get to copy paste your code pretty easily. Otherwise, you have like 2 files that you need to copy paste over. It kind of gets hard. So there's some resources that I like. First one is dev tips. It has changed a little bit. The person who used to run it doesn't do that anymore. Now a different guy from Fun Function does it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They have a lot of beginner tutorials. They go through beginner concepts. Sometimes they have project level things. It's like a few weeks course. And they go through and show you how they build a project. Kenzie Dodds, he's amazing. If you're into JavaScript and React, he just recently turned into a full-time instructor. He used to work at PayPal. He does a lot of open source work. Then if you're still more interested in JavaScript, You Don't Know JavaScript is a really, really good book. It's a little bit dry, it's a little bit long, but if you read through all the books, this is also free, you're going to be a JavaScript master. The other way that I like to learn, if you couldn't tell, it's also on YouTube by conference videos on different things. There's Coding Tech. They get conference videos from other conferences and compile it together. JSConf is a good one, ReactConf, and there's a bunch of also little ones that really good speakers go to. And there are different communities that you can reach out to. Dayton Web Developer is one. There's also Reactiflux. This is a React-specific Discord community. They have one for I18N, they have one for React, for Redux, MobX. I think those are in different communities. But Reactiflux is a really good one.
Can I throw one on your resources?
Sure.
This weekend, starting Friday for the weekend, Pluralsight has free access to all of their Pluralsight videos. So this is a great weekend to take advantage of that. So if you're not familiar with Pluralsight, they're a very deep dive, technical video training course website. And if it's anything you're really interested in, anything close to C# or .NET, they're very strong on that.
Nice. Yeah, so thank you for coming. It's a little bit hectic, but if you'd like to get, if you want to chat, here's my email. I'm also involved with Code for Dayton. I'm leading a new project called Xenia. It's building a volunteer website for Dayton specific, connecting.
I didn't do it justice. I didn't do it. You want to give a commercial for Code for Dayton?
Sure. So Code for Dayton, we're part of Code for America. We do projects relating to civic tech. We want people to be more engaged with the local government and local community. So our most recent project that I'm leading is to build a volunteer platform, and it's specifically for Dayton, and be able to be connected with different nonprofits. There's about 70 nonprofits in Dayton, and roughly 70 schools. I haven't checked the numbers quite, if they're valid schools or not. But yeah, we got 5 people so far. We're meeting also tomorrow. If you're more interested, send me an email. You can also make your own project.
Yes, 2 blocks that way. It's over at the big brownish.
Miles 2?
Well, so Mile 2 is the company on the 2nd floor, but it's the 444 building.
Oh, yes.
So between here and Dayton Beer Company is the 444 company. And then 2 blocks that way is the Tech Town, which is where the Dayton.net is. And then they're all
Sweet. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.